Hey there, my friends. Andy coming to you live from Yorba Linda, California for the Andy Falco Show. And it's been a while, as you can probably see if you've been watching the show. I'm in a whole new studio now, which is in our new home in Yorba Linda. And hopefully everything will go well. We got everything set up. We've done one show with my wife on the Living Fearless Devotional podcast that we do on the Real Life Network with Pastor Jack Hibbs. And so hopefully everything will run fairly well. So we still have nonsense debauchery going on in our district, and it just seems to get worse. I don't understand how it is that they could come up with new ways to become even more crazy, whether it's some of the teachers that are in our district or the three liberal school board members, again, constantly trying to think of ways to talk nicely and not use bad words. I'm a work in progress. And the superintendent, however, I got to say, I'll tell you about this in a little bit. An issue happened with one of my kids, and I got to say she responded well to my email. And at least at this point, looks like she's taken appropriate steps, but I'll share a little bit of that with you. And that's kind of what brings me to do the show today and finally be able to come on and broadcast as we're setting up stuff still with our media program that we have here. But it just is necessary because I may become too buried in screenshots and emails and text messages from parents around the district, teachers that want to remain nameless, and a number of other people in other school districts. I had a call from a friend of mine from high school. One of his sons is in the La Habra school district, and they fired a teacher over there because in response to some bad behavior in his classroom, he had the kids doing push-ups. And I thought, wow, that's fantastic. Every teacher should do that. And they fired him because of it. And I said, wait, what? Yeah, they said, yeah. And so I'm going to get more details on that. But he called me to let me know that they're trying to get him back. A bunch of parents, I guess, wrote to the school district trying to get him back. I got to get an update on that. That happened in the middle of my move, so I'm not quite up to date on what's going out there. But I get emails and messages from people all over the United States. Again, my wife is speaking about the dangers of Islam throughout the United States at different churches and events. We went with Steve Hilton the day before yesterday and talked to him about what's happening here in the state of California. So there's just a lot of incoming on so many issues, but they all relate, whether it has to do with Islam or the National Educators Association or the California Teachers Association or the American Federation of Teachers, which I couldn't remember the other day in one of my last broadcasts. So that's what it's called, AFT. With the lunatic Weingarten, just, I mean, nearly as bad as the president, the former president. I think we have a new president for the California Teachers Association, but the last one was a hoot, even crazier. She was yelling and screaming and ranting and raving at the podium one day. But all these things are related. It is no different. It is the socialist, humanist, Marxist left, which are the Democrats, versus America, versus parents and children in our schools and teachers that want to do the job of teaching. It is a group of people, the Democrat Party, which encompasses liberals and others on the left, that are just hate America, hate Christians, hate America, hate families. And you will not be able to, at this point, get me to separate them any longer. There was a time early on when I would say liberal and a Democrat. The liberals weren't necessarily Democrats, but that is long gone. They are one and the same. And it has become very apparent when you listen to Chuck Schumer speak or any of the other, Swalwell, Pencilneck, any of those people. They are all on the same script. It is a script that apparently is created in some war room somewhere and gets sent out, and they all repeat the very same stuff. And they don't remember, or they fail to understand the power of recorded video, because they'll say something when, whatever president, it could have been Obama, it could have been Clinton, it could have been Biden, or they say one thing Like Iran is bad. They can't be allowed to have a nuclear weapon, that they're hours away of creating a nuclear weapon and they're going to kill us. That's the left that was saying this. This was Democrats, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, all these people. They were just saying they are probably the most dangerous, along with China and Russia. But Iran is the craziest and the most dangerous. That was them saying it back then. But now when President Trump has gone in and actually did something about it, after all their talk about that we should do something about it for decades and decades, 47 years, that when President Trump actually does something about it, now they're friends with Iran. They love the mullahs. They love the terrorists. They love that they're in our country. And they get mad when you try to get them out, or they get mad at him or Tom Homan or any of those people. They say, no, you're horrible. He's a pedophile. He's all these things. When we just say, if you just were to watch the videos from just a couple of years ago, you were saying the exact same thing that caused him to take action. That they were building a nuclear weapon. They were building long-range missiles, that they were killing American soldiers, and they were terrorists. You were saying the same thing. But now today, or even yesterday or the day before yesterday, you can see them on video saying, no, they are peaceful people. We hope that America loses. We want our soldiers to die. And if you don't believe me, I'm going to play a video here. This is a Democrat speaking at an event just, I believe it was yesterday, the day before yesterday. I cut this out of the Dan Bongino show, but this is who they are. No longer, if you're watching this, there is no separation from the radical Muslims or radical LGBTQ, the Red Green Alliance, the Marxists, the communists, as we have in New York, the mayor of New York, Mamdani. There is no different. They are the Democrats. These are Democrats. These are your neighbors that are Democrats. These are the Bonnie Contes of the world, the Esther Kims of the world, Marilyn Anderson, Quintero, Buck. These are all the same people. They believe the same thing. Do not think that they are separate. Do not believe that they think any differently. Anyone, I'm going to play the video in a minute, but anyone who believes that men should be allowed in your girl's restroom at a high school or junior high or elementary school, that believes that, or that believes men can get pregnant, or that tampons belong in the boys' bathroom at schools, has the same mental illness and attitude that anybody that we see that will stand in front of that will drive over a police officer standing in front of the car trying to kill him, or take a gun to a protest and then claim that he shouldn't have been shot when he became a felon that was armed, regardless if he had a permit. He became an armed felon, and during the time that he was fighting with a police officer, he ends up getting shot. That you think that he's the good guy, or that George Floyd was a good guy. You are a Democrat at this point. You're no longer a lunatic left or a liberal or whatever other name you want to attach to them. They're all the same people. So I'm going to play this video. Listen to what this guy says. And this is an American guy, apparently, in the United States. This is in Philadelphia, I believe. And this is him speaking to other Democrats in the crowd, and they're all cheering. Listen to what he has to say.
Watch these people. Listen to this at the Philly protest. They're cheering for what? Did I hear this correctly? Check this out.
Until we have done everything in our power to bring the United States to its knees, let us not lose sight of the enemy. For every U.S. military base that crumbles, and for every U.S. soldier who returns home in a casket, we cheer. Hamas, Hezbollah, Ansar-Allah, all of the resistance forces we celebrate. These popular voices on the ground spend every waking moment in direct confrontation with Zionism, and they rely on a strong Iranian state to maintain their fighting capacity.
Do you hate America? May a Hamas rocket blow up your family's home.
May an effing rocket blow up your family's house. We know that this is the Democratic Party because no one ever speaks out about it. Nobody from the Democratic Party speaks out about it and says this shouldn't happen. They vote in an attorney general in Virginia, I believe it was, who sent text message about how he wanted to kill the person that was running against him and his family and his children. These are the same people. You cannot separate them any longer. It's impossible to do that any longer. Let's see. Helen says the Democrats are no longer the same party. Absolutely. Clinton was when he was in, there were some things that I could agree with, and there were a lot of things that, of course, that I didn't agree with as a lifelong Republican. But there were some things that he did that were actually fairly decent and good. There may have been something that Hillary may have done at some point. I can't think of one, but there could have been something back in the day, not now, but back in those days. There was nothing. Obama was probably after Carter, trying to think of any others, but was one of the worst presidents. I mean, of course, Biden wasn't a president, so I don't include him. He was just a warm body that happened to have the presidential seal in front of him from time to time. But Obama was the first in first place for the worst president ever. He did so many things. Obamacare did anything but help with our health care and make it affordable. It was called the Affordable Care Act, I believe. And it's anything but affordable, and has only increased the wealth of insurance companies, which again is really interesting because you have these Democrats that are praising this kid who went out and shot either the president or vice president of one of the healthcare insurance companies. Went out and shot him, and they love that kid. So they love people who kill other people, and they hate the insurance company and the man who represented the insurance company enough that they wanted him dead, and they praise the guy who killed him. But they're also, the Democrat Party is the one who created Obamacare. Obamacare made the insurance companies rich, and they're still fighting for Obamacare, and they will defend Obamacare. See, this is what happens to them all the time, is they create something that creates a problem that they can come in and try to pretend that they're going to be the savior of all of you from the problem that they created, and then make money off of the process of talking about how they're going to fix it and then never fix it. This is what they do. Gavin Newsom here in California has talked about fixing homelessness and raised billions of dollars, or taken billions of dollars from all of us taxpayers and the federal taxpayers. In addition to that, millions, if not billions of dollars over his tenure here as governor of the state of California. And it's made the problem worse. So again, they create the problem. They create NGOs and other organizations that pretend they're going to fix the problem. And they talk about how they're going to fix the problem. They even build buildings in Los Angeles to the tune of millions of dollars that are sitting empty with no homeless people coming in them. But who gets rich? The PAC members, the construction workers who are on the dole for creating the contracts that allow them to build the buildings. All of them make money, but yet the solution that they say they're going to create, and in some cases kind of somewhat create, it then doesn't. They do nothing with it. It doesn't fix the problem. It makes it worse. And then they say, you know what? We just need a little bit more money. We need another $50 million. We need another $1 billion. And no, for sure, we're going to fix the problem. And then, well, we have a transportation issue, and they don't fix the roads. And they go, well, we'll build a train. And then they come up with this huge plan to fix a train, or to create a train that's going to go from San Francisco to Los Angeles back and forth. And they have overruns, and they have delays. And over the last 10, 15 years, however long they've been building this thing, it's never been built. They got like this little section in the middle of nowhere that's cost all of us hundreds of billions of dollars. And yet they say, well, we need more money in order to fix it. And this is a scam, and has been a scam of the left for so many years. Yes, Helen agrees. She says, yes, create the problem, then try to fix it. and just keep claiming they need more money. And so here it brings me to what I really came on to talk about, and that is, of course, here PYLUSD, the Placentia Oberlin Unified School District, and education as far as that's concerned. And I just want to run through something I went through a few months ago, and I had a lot more slides, but I'm just going to bring you a few. Now, there's going to be a couple typos on some of these slides, so I know I'm like the Leering Center in Minnesota. I could be talking about education, and then a couple of my slides have typos. What I did is I cut and paste, and apparently, when you cut and paste using the Apple app, it doesn't catch all the letters, and I didn't even pay attention to that when I did that. So that's my excuse anyway. And so we have the NEA. So I'm going to talk about the National Educators Association, and this comes from a book. Let's see where it starts. So I want to start with this one here. And so this is, oh, sorry, wrong one. I knew I'd start with the wrong one. Here we go. Okay, there we go. National Educators Association and the NEA. This is, again, this is in actuality, a scam. The NEA has been a scam since its creation nearly 100 years ago. I can't remember exactly how many years ago, but it's several decades ago that it came into existence in the early 1900s. And I can't remember the exact date. I could have that a little bit wrong. But, and this comes from the book called NEA, Trojan Horse in America Education. And it was written in 1984. And at the time, there was a report to Congress, to a commission's report for Congress that was written in 1983. And this, some of what I'm reading comes from that report. And it says, as far as the NEA is concerned, the commission report is a license to plunder the American taxpayer. And if anyone thinks that more money in the hands of the present educational leadership will give us anything but more of what we now have, he is deluding himself. The record speaks for itself. In a booklet entitled Local, State, and Federal Roles, issued by the NEA in December 1983, we are told NEA is no newcomer to educational reform movements. Not good reform, actually. Organized teachers have been involved in every reform effort in education in this country. In 1911 is somewhere when it started. Like I said, it was over 100 years ago. 1924, 1934, 1954, 1974. What the booklet fails to add is that all of these reforms deliberately, that word deliberately is deliberately put in this report, deliberately created the tide of mediocrity that now threatens our very future. And so the NEA is not about to rescind any one of them. On the contrary, everything the NEA says and does indicates that it intends to carry these reforms to their ultimate goal, a socialist, humanist society controlled by educators and behavioral scientists. If money were the answer, our problem would have been solved long ago. For no nation in history has pumped more of its wealth into education than this one. And no people has been more generous to the trusting of educators. But unfortunately, that trust has been abused with a cynicism, arrogance, and greed that can only come out of a spirit of pure, unadulterated malevolence. That is what is in this book. That's also what was in the report all the way back in 1983, and has been going on since 1911. So the idea that anything is going to get better, as the CTA, the California Teachers Association, or the NEA says that we need more money for our education system, that money will go and improve anything, that will allow kids to read any better, or to do math any better, or to do well socially, or to get a job, is just false. That is the lightest I could put it, besides saying that it's BS. That what they say, but they've always said this. They said, give us more money, and now we're actually going to start educating kids. No, it's much like the homeless situation here in California. The more money you give them, the more that it increases. So more money into the homeless situation here in California, it has increased. It is, I think it's doubled in the last 10 years here in California. In education, the more money you give them, the less our children become educated, and the more they bring out in indoctrination. And so when I have, over the years, when I first started talking about CRT, nobody knew what it was. And then I started talking about DEI, and they're going, what's that? And then I started talking about SEL, which is social emotional learning. DEI, of course, is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then CRT is critical race theory. They are all the same. And so you have people, I get attacked online by some of the dumbest people on the planet, which are here in our community, about how CRT isn't a real thing. They continue this nonsense, which we've debunked 5, 6, 7 years ago on many of our shows, not only through me, but some of the people that I've had guests on my show, is that CRT is in fact being taught in elementary schools, in junior highs and high schools, and of course in our colleges, because they want to say, no, this is a university thing that's actually a study. It's not a part of an educational indoctrination or an educational process. It is. Because what they do is they change the name of it and call it DEI. DEI is CRT. SEL, social emotional learning, is CRT. It's all the thing. It's the way to create a division between the socialists and the nihilism that's going on in our schools and parents and children. They don't even have to be Christian. Now, they hate Christianity. They absolutely have to not have that. But it's also even those people that aren't Christian that want to be educated, that want to have knowledge. You can see in the NEA report and what the NEA is all about. It's about uneducation or de-education or non-education, anything that's not going to educate your kids. That is what the NEA is for. Because if they can remove God from our schools, which means they can disenfranchise the Christians in the schools and confuse them, they'll have less Christians they have to deal with, because you can't have a higher God other than the humanists or the socialists. That is their religion. The same with Islam. Islam is anti-Christian. Islam is anti-government. It's anti-America. So, but you need to build a system of teaching like CRT and SEL and a DEI program that separates people from that thought process, from that possibility of free thinking, and thinking that capitalism is what created our country. Capitalism is what runs our country. Capitalism is the best thing. No, they want bigger government. They want to have a government that gives them everything for free. We want kids that are mentally prepared for indoctrination, which means weakening their minds and not having a higher God and not have parents that they can look to for truth and facts and care. If they separate children from their parents, they're more likely to make them vulnerable, so that they will be vulnerable enough to accept the idea of socialism, nihilism, humanism, and Marxism, communism, all the isms. And that only happens when you separate children from their family, from parents, from church, from God. That has to happen. This has been in place forever. If I can find it easily, and I'm going to bring it up here. If we go all the way back to Dewey, let's see. I have it here. Sorry, my screen is so far away. So Horace Mann, back in 1837, man's attitude toward other people's children was bizarre too. Even by today's standards, in his 1867 lectures and annual reports on education, Mann claimed that those engaged in the sacred cause of education were entitled to look upon all parents as having given hostages to our cause. Hostages to their cause. Shortly before his appointment as education secretary, he gushed at the mere thought of having the future minds of such multitudes dependent in some way on him. So he wanted to be their God. Now we have John Dewey. I'm sorry, that was Horace Grant. John Dewey says in his important 1898 essay, The Primary Education, Dewey argued strongly against the then heavy emphasis on reading, writing, and arithmetic in the younger years. It produced highly literate, independent-minded individuals with faith in God and freedom that was not conducive to a collectivist utopia. Obviously, collectivist utopia is also a means to socialism and Marxism and communism, which is what they want. And they've done it slowly. This has been a process that they knew would take time, and they're actually succeeding, as we can see in many of our universities. We can see that we have kids fighting for socialism, fighting for communism, voting for a communist. Many of them are in their 20s and 30s now, and we see that. We see a lot of white women who seem to be more susceptible to indoctrination and this belief than probably any other peoples in our communities. For whatever reason, white women seem to be more vulnerable to this and have been easier to indoctrinate. You can, once you get them away from believing in God, or even a God, they could be Mormons, they could be other religions, but in particular Christians is what they knew they fight it against. So where do we see this happening today in PYLUSD? Well, actually, let me go around the nation just a little bit. It includes California. And then we have this situation here where we have some of the worst people as part of our education system. This is in LAUSD. This is just earlier this month of March 2026. Federal authorities on Tuesday are conducting raids at the San Pedro home of Los Angeles Unified School District Superintendent Alberto Caviallo and the LAUSD headquarters because he was stealing money from LAUSD, from the citizens. And he just thought that that's something that he could do. And he thought that that would be okay. But we see this happening in a lot of places. It's just not there. At the Brea Unified School District, we have a pedophile that it was on the school board. We have things happening in Santa Ana, in Orange Unified School District, and you have scandals between a husband and wife in that school district. Also, it is crazy. But this is the kind of people that have been created through the NEA. They've been raised through, and we have Democrats and liberals that think that they could just build these organizations and use the money for their own personal use. This happens all the time, and it becomes a little bit of a disease. You have this person here, this young lady that is a victim of our school system, the NEA in particular, and probably the AFT. Makina graduated with a 3.87 GPA despite, so a 3.87 GPA, you would think with that you should be able to read, despite finishing her senior year reading at a first grade level. Her attorneys argue that, well-intentioned or not, the district should have withheld her diploma until she completed vocational program to learn how to read. So what they're doing is and that's happened here in California. Sorry, I got to find where I have to get rid of this screenshot. What they do is they lower the standards required to get a diploma to a point that you don't even need to know how to read. You don't even need to know how to do math. As a matter of fact, there's many cases where we've seen in California and other places where you don't even need to show up for class. You can barely show up to class and still receive a diploma, because apparently education, as we've heard, and I've heard this argument too, and it's been yelled at me, that making kids learn and to meet a minimum standard is racist. It's racist to expect Black children and Mexican children to know how to read. They're too stupid, they say. These Democrats, they will tell you to your face that Black people and Mexicans are not smart enough to go to school on a regular basis or to read or write. And so we can't expect them to pass a minimum standard or to test them, because that would be racist, because they're too stupid. It's stupid. No, I mean, it's racist to say that they're stupid, isn't it? It used to be. It used to be stupid. I'm sorry. It used to be racist to call them stupid because of them being Black and Mexican. But Democrats do it all the time. They do it all the time in this fact that they say, well, we can't expect them to show up for school. We can't expect them to meet a minimum standard because it's racist to expect them to do that. And so what they do is they stop educating. Mediocrity is the plan, is the end goal. It's not necessarily because they want to uneducate Mexicans and Black. They want to educate the whites, but they can do it through saying, well, we can't expect the Mexicans and Blacks to do it, so we can't have a separate standard for whites. They would want to do that. They thought that was good, but they're doing it because they want to uneducate white people also. And we see it in white women who are marching against ICE, that are marching in things like No Kings, that are marching and saying, no, we must be able to kill as many children as possible through abortion. That is fantastic. We love killing babies. The only way you've been able to do that with white women is by uneducating them so that they don't have the ability to process and think. This is how we know that only the uneducated, the indoctrinated, that are the most vulnerable are the ones that believe that they need to foment and become passionate about killing babies. That's the only way you get people to that degree. That's the only way that it happens. And this woman, unfortunately, that's suing now because she can't read, is a victim of that. Here in, I think it's Florida, you have a sting that was performed. And it says here in the headlines, a sleeping 2-year-old rescued, a missing teenager freed, a high school teacher arrested, and 89 other predators that he was hanging around with, or her, it could have been him or her, caught in one Florida sting. Teachers are getting caught up in this stuff all the time. We saw in Minnesota when they were throwing rocks and bricks and Molotov cocktails at law enforcement over there, that many of the people that were getting arrested were teachers. How are they able to do that? Because it was happening during Monday and Friday during the hours of school. It happened because they said, you know what, because of ICE being in the city of Minnesota, Minneapolis, Minnesota, sorry, that we can't hold school. They didn't close school because it was dangerous for kids. They closed school because they knew many teachers are Democrats, and they would go out and assist in the protesting and harassing law enforcement and impeding their ability to enforce the law, and would throw rocks and bricks and everything and ice at them. And so that's why they closed schools. And they would also be able to get some of their kids to do it, which they've also done here in PYLUSD. And so this is the type of people that are created through this indoctrination. You have Bonnie Conte here, who is not a teacher. I don't think she's ever been a teacher, I don't believe. But she runs a group called Your Belinda Moms. And look at what she writes here. There's this girl by the name of Katie Crockett. I'm not sure what she was responding to in this. I have the other part of this, but I forgot what it was. I think she had some post about Leandra Blades, who is a school board member here in PYLUSD. And she says, correct, our PYLUSD Leandra that Mrs. Frazzled is highlighting is tight with Chino Valley School Board's Sonia Shaw, another school member over at Chino Valley. And they are connected to Calvary Chapel's Jack Hibbs. So Bonnie hates Christians also. She especially hates Jack Hibbs. Lots of crossover that all toss back to M4L, as you mentioned. Also, Chino Valley Sonia is running for California State Superintendent. So we have these supporters, I guess it is, of socialism and communism, supporters of the CTA that are in our community. They will, on occasion, pretend to be Christians and use scripture and other things. They may even show up at a church once in a while, but they're not obviously Christians, because they don't like it when you say, well, if you're a Christian, then you must also believe that abortion is evil. It is from the devil. You must also believe that believing that men should be in girls' locker rooms in sports is also evil. You must also believe that there's only two genders, men and women. And they'll say, no. Well, as soon as they say, put their hands up and say, well, you can't say that, you know that they're absolutely not Christians. That's the interesting thing about that. But Bonnie Conte, Esther Kim, I think are some of those people that they will put up the scripture and say, Jesus is love. Yes, but he's also said, whether as Jesus or the Holy Spirit or God, that it is abhorrent that a man dressed like a woman. It's actually in the Bible. And they go, well, I'm going to ignore that. Harming children is evil. You should have a stone tied around your neck and thrown into the water if you harm a hair on a child's head, the Bible says. Well, no, it doesn't mean that men and girls' bathrooms is going to cause that to happen. No, it does. It means that you have a mentally ill man in a girl's restroom because for the only reason for some sexual stimulation or from some sex crime that he's imagining that he might be able to perform. That's the only reason men go into girls' restrooms. The same people whether it's Marilyn Anderson, Quintero, and or Buck. If we say this all the time, it's just important to bring out. But if I or any one of the other men that show up on the conservative side of things over at the school board meeting went into the women's restroom when they were using it, you know that they would call the police immediately. But that's the crazy thing. They would do that if a man came into the restroom when they were using it, and they would fly off the handle. They would post it all on social media. They would say, that if it was me, they'd say, he's a rapist or he rapes little girls. He came into the restroom while I was in it, right? They would post that everywhere. But when they do it, that's not bad. But when we say, hey, we don't want men in our girls' locker room at El Dorado High School, now I become the pedophile because I brought it up or because a parent sent me a picture that their daughter took while a man was in this actually happened, fully clothed people. The man who was dressed like a girl was in the restroom at the El Dorado High School. One of the kids took a picture of that man in the restroom, the girls' restroom at El Dorado High School. And I send it to everybody in the district. So now everybody in the district has it on their emails and computer. Again, there's nobody naked in it. Or fully clothed man dressed as a woman inside the girls' restroom. But now I was the horrible person. And so either way, I'm the horrible person. I'm the horrible person if I go into their women's restroom there at the school board building. But I'm also the horrible person that points out that, wait a minute, there was a man in this girls' restroom at El Dorado High School. And I'm also the most horrible person on the planet. They do this with J6 too. And Bonnie Conte brought up Leandra Blades, and they call her a J6er, an insurrectionist. All that. She happened to be in Washington, D.C. at the time, listening to President Trump speak on January 6th. She didn't go into the Capitol building. She didn't do anything. She was just there. And anybody that happened to be in Washington, D.C. at that time was apparently an insurrectionist or a J6er. But their whole argument about J6, for the most part, is that they attacked law enforcement, that they threw rocks at them, that they pushed them, that they tackled them, that they did a bunch of other things. That is one of the main arguments, is that how horrible it was that these people attacked law enforcement. And so you must hate Leandra Blades because she was in Washington, D.C. on a day where, and probably a few did, and I think all those people should be arrested who did anything violent towards law enforcement. I agree that they should be arrested and forever what the statute is, not for life, obviously. But I can also agree that that's bad. But then the same people that say that Leandra Blades to this day is a horrible person and should not be in the scoreboard because she was there and she happened to be in the same city when this was happening, are the same people that are now attacking law enforcement. They're the same people that are now throwing bricks and Molotov cocktails and doxing them and following them home and threatening their lives. These are the same people of how horrible J6ers are on that 1 hour that this happened. But now for months, they've been attacking law enforcement. But Leandra Blades is the horrible one. This is what they do constantly. This is a constant thing with them. You cannot go into the women's restroom if they were in a women's restroom, but we want men to be in your girls' restrooms and play against them in their girls' sports. That is what's happening. So let me bring you to a couple things that are happening now. Did I bring this one up already? Yes. So for me, what caused me to really want to come out and speak today were just incident that happens in my life with my kids. First, let me just see this comment up here that are pretty horrific. Helen says, the train is a joke. Yeah, the train to nowhere. Divide us by race and status. Absolutely. So thank you for those comments, Helen. So I'm going to start with my youngest son. He's in 6th grade. So he's at Brookhaven Elementary School. And you have this teacher named Ms. Alexic, and probably one of the worst teachers in our district, I believe. She puts up transgender slides, slides of a transgender person. This is an elementary school. Why are you doing this in an elementary school, a 6th grade class? Now, apparently she wanted to talk about bullying, and you don't need to do that. Why out of all that are you putting up a trans? I don't know that there may be a transgender person at Brookhaven Elementary. How about just say it's wrong to bully? Don't bully people. And on top of that, teach children how not to be the victim of bullying. Quite often, if you could just teach kids, hey, words are not going to hurt you. I mean, we learned that when we were little kids. Sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never harm you. I mean, I still remember it from elementary school. That's what I was taught. It was if somebody says something to you, just ignore them and laugh at them, and teach them that there's probably something horrible going on with that child's life, that maybe you should be praying for them and feel sorry about not feel sorry for them, but have empathy. That's a better word for it. Have empathy for a child who's lashing out with anger. It's because it's possibly something that's going on in their life that they need maybe some compassion, as opposed to always being the victim of somebody saying that you're fat, you're ugly, you're stupid, you're short, you're tall, whatever it is that they're bullying you for. You talk like a girl and you're a boy, whatever that is. Just don't allow it to ruin your day. Teaching kids how to have strength and courage and confidence and fearlessness. That should be a part of bullying, not always diminishing somebody because they're white and saying that you have white privilege and that you should be sad for yourself and you should be ashamed of yourself for being born white. That's what they're doing. Or you should be ashamed of being straight, that it is more virtuous to be gay and transgender, which is a mental health issue, especially in transgenderism. It is a mental health issue. Putting up a picture on a slide in front of the class and talking about this person, the transgender person, and showing the little kids should be against the law, but apparently it is not. And one of the kids, my son reported to me, asked, "Is that a boy or a girl?" out loud. All the kids, of course, laughed. You're creating an environment where you're asking for this kind of thing to happen by putting up a transgender kid or an adult, whatever it was, on a slide in the classroom. You're asking for one of the kids to say, you're talking to little kids, right? You know what you should say or not do in your home, unless you want a response from a kid who has no filter at that point when they're in elementary school. And so one of the kids asked, "Is a boy or girl?" And then Alexa loses her mind, they said, and said that it doesn't matter what I don't know if she said it or they or them. I don't know what she said, but she says it doesn't matter. And so this is what's happening in our schools. To follow that up, and so this is on the same topic, is that we then have a volunteer at Glenview Elementary here in PYLUSD who is handing these stickers out to the kids in the class. And I believe it was a 4th grade class. Don't quote me on that necessarily, but it was elementary school for sure. Glenview Elementary, handing out these stupid stickers of the rainbow flag, which she doesn't mean as it is in the Bible, that God created the rainbow for his promise never to flood the world again. No, it is a rainbow flag for LGBTQ, mostly because of the colors. And then one of them has a cross on it. That is crazy. So you have a crazy woman who volunteers in Glenview Elementary School and hands out these stickers to a Catholic kid. This picture that I got was from a mother who's Catholic and raises her children as strong Catholics. And there's no other purpose to do that than to cause problems in the mind of the children that she's handing them out to, especially those that she knows. Oh, how did I do that? Somehow I created fireworks. Perfect. That is to create confusion with her child in his belief or her belief. That is why they do this. Here, let me hand this to you, Catholic child. Your religion is a joke. It doesn't believe that, whatever, plug in whatever horrible thing that they're trying to teach, that the child is not compassionate because they're Catholic, or they're hate-filled, or they're white, or they're Hispanic and they don't deserve an education or what they have because they are mean people. And so this is how this opens up that door to create division between this child and their faith, a division between this child and their parents, because pretty soon they may begin to believe nonsense like this volunteer started, that their parents, the child doesn't want to be hateful. The child doesn't want to believe that their faith or their religion is bad. And if you can get them to believe that, then what happens? They then begin to separate from their parents who have this strong belief and understand what is being done, that their child is being indoctrinated. And now this schism is created between the child and their parents, and it has to do with their faith. And that is what this volunteer over at Glenview Elementary was doing by handing out these stickers to every kid in that class. I believe something may be being done, which again, I can applaud the school district for doing something about it. I'm not sure 100%. I'll find out by the time, maybe by the end of the day or tomorrow, because it just came out, I believe yesterday is when I got this screenshot sent to me. And then I have my other son who's at Orange County School of Computer Science, who was asked in the class environment by a substitute teacher, by Miss Tan. So she asked in the class, this is in history class, by the way, U.S. history class. No, I think it's world history class, by the way, I think. World history class, I should know this. World history class. So this question is asked, who is your hero? And my son says out loud, President Trump. And immediately, without hesitation, she says, you know, he rapes little girls. He's in the Epstein files. So let's just say that you don't like President Trump for a reason. That there's a few people that don't like him, not as many as you actually think, but there are people that don't like him, and that is fine. But if the child would have said, my hero is Martin Luther King, would you think it's appropriate for that teacher to then say, you know, he's a womanizer and cheated on his wife and impregnated women and didn't take care of the child? Is that appropriate for a teacher to go into that detail? Then that happens to be true about Martin Luther King. So that's something that's true. Would it be appropriate for somebody to do that? Cesar Chavez just recently, my dad knew that. My dad's, passed away now. And back, I remember when I was a kid, when Cesar Chavez was being looked at as a hero, my dad says, that guy's not a hero. He apparently knew people that knew him. And he says, that guy is not a good person. He's a horrible person. He does things to girls, is what he told me. I remember all the way back then. And so I've always had this disdain for Cesar Chavez elementary schools and streets and things like that. I said, my dad used to say that guy's not a good person. My dad's Mexican, by the way. And so his parents were born in Mexico. They came and became naturalized in Texas. And so my dad was born in Texas, but his parents were from Mexico City. And so my dad knew this early on from people who knew Cesar Chavez back in the 70s and 60s, I believe. And so, but let's just say one of the Mexicans said, my hero is Cesar Chavez. Again, at that point, maybe it would have been yesterday that this happened, would have been appropriate for the teacher to even go to that person, even though now we have a victim of his evilness coming out and saying, I kept it quiet because I didn't want to ruin the movement. Would it have been appropriate for the teacher even then to go to that child? Hey, do you know that he raped little girls? There's several victims in a junior high class. Do you think that would have been appropriate? Or maybe send a message to the parents, or maybe have a phone call and say, hey, your son or daughter said that this is their hero. I'm not sure if you're aware that there's some news that recently came out. Just want to make you aware. I mean, that's something, or you ignore it because the other kids may not know this. They may just know where there's a street named after them. But again, I'm talking about things that are true. This is a very funky situation. But in my son's case, that is not true. There's never been any victims or evidence that has come through that President Trump ever did anything that what she accused him of, that horrific accusation. We know for decades, at least for sure about 15 years, some of the most, prominent attorneys, you have states attorney generals, you have the FBI, the CIA, the DOJ in the hands of Obama, and then in Biden investigating President Trump, and they've found nothing, absolutely nothing to charge him with. There's nothing that they've been able to charge him with. Do you think that when they had control of all the Epstein files and they could look through everything unredacted, that they would not have taken something that they found in there and charged him with it? Of course they would have. And so there's nothing. The only thing in the Epstein files is that he turned in Epstein to the local police and the FBI and was an informant on what Epstein was doing. That's the only thing that's actually in there, and was friendly with Epstein for a period of time until he found out about Epstein and then unfriended him. And so you have a teacher, a substitute teacher in a U.S. history or a world history class saying that the current president, rapes little girls in the class in front of everybody to diminish my son's ideas that he likes his philanthropy. He likes that he, was a president that was attacked from every direction and continued on, that he's a person that was shot in an assassination attempt and didn't lay on the ground and suck his thumb. He stood back up and said, fight, fight, fight. There's a lot of things that my son loves about President Trump, and none of it is probably anything that you wouldn't expect for somebody to have a hero in if it wasn't President Trump. Success in business, works hard. He doesn't drink and doesn't smoke and has never used drugs. These are all good things, right? Regardless of what you want to say about him or what you don't like about in the way that he talks. Because I've had that discussion with him. I can have those discussions and say, President Trump has a lot of great, qualities to him. There's some things that he's doing that I'm not necessarily for. And we talk about those too, but we'll see how it works out. He is our president, and so far he's made decisions that have bettered this country. But there are some things that I'm concerned about. I can have those conversations. I can tell my son, hey, there's things that he says that maybe wouldn't want to put it that way. He has sometimes a plan, and when he does certain things and says certain things, and so you got to admire that. But there's certain things that he says that maybe you shouldn't say, whatever that thing is. But it's not the teacher's position to make up something entirely and then say he rapes little girls to harm my son's feelings or his thought process of, wow, he rapes little girls, and now he has to come home to me and say, hey, the teacher told me that President Trump rapes little girls. And now I say, wait, what? So this is really crazy. And then the last note, when she throws in the Epstein files, and now what you're telling the entire class is that there's this thing called the Epstein files, which they may or may not already know about it. But now it puts even more of a thought in their process, which now they have access to computers and their phones, that now they're going to research the Epstein files and look at all of the things that are horrific that are in the Epstein files. This was so wrong in so many ways. And of course, I spelled this out in an email to Dr. Kim Esparza. And I got to tell you that she responded with a very good email, that she's taken action and investigating it, and will ask the Human Resources Department to take appropriate action once they have their findings. And it was a well-written email. I've said things about the superintendent, by the way, she's our superintendent, that question her competency, because she did encourage kids to go off campus to protest against ICE about a lie that was created that I pointed out was a lie. But I think whether it was a lie or not, encouraging kids to leave campus and put themselves in danger, I think was below what a superintendent should do, and thought that was really important to address also. So I have my doubts about her as a leader, but I can tell you she handled this situation in an email so far in a way that is appropriate and acceptable with me, to see what the outcome eventually will be. All right. So, wow, that 54 minutes went by really fast. So I'm going to leave it at that. I have a lot more screenshots. I'm just going to leave it at that. And I hope that it spelled out a little bit about how we got here and where we're at and why this is not getting better. It's not just the teachers. It's also the teachers unions. And then we have a couple activists in our community who hate God, who hate Christians, who hate white people, that happen to be white, by the way, that love criminal, illegal aliens. They hate law enforcement. They are contradictory in that they say J6ers or horrible because they attack law enforcement. And then now for months, all of the people that have said that about the J6ers have been attacking law enforcement. That really is one of the craziest things. They also, love Obamacare, that created powerful insurance companies. And then they also praise the guy who shot the president or vice president of an insurance company, which is very strange because I thought you loved the insurance companies because you created Obamacare to enrich the insurance companies. None of it they never make any sense. They also said that the nuclear capabilities of Iran was days away from happening, as just 10, 5, I think even 3 years ago, 2 to 3 years ago, they were saying this. And now suddenly they love Iran, the mullahs, as far as that's concerned, not the citizens of Iran. They hate them. But they love the mullahs and the Islamists, sorry. They love them. So you just make it make sense at some point. Okay, my friends, that's it for this particular show, the Andy Falco Show. And just let me know what you think. Make sure and comment when you watch, if you're watching the replay. And thank you to Helen, who was on quite a bit. And I just appreciate her input on this show. All right, my friends, we'll talk to you later. Take care. Bye.